The evening was supposed to be quiet. I'd worked late, wrapping up reports nobody would read until Monday, grabbed takeout from that place Carmen and I used to love, and drove home in the kind of silence that settles into a man's bones after too many years of holding his breath. I wasn't expecting fireworks. Just peace. Maybe a glass of scotch. Maybe her curled up next to me on the couch, her laugh bouncing off the walls like it used to. Instead, I got the sound of keys fumbling at the front door. Sloppy. Not like her. Carmen always moved like a movie scene, smooth, framed just right. But when the door finally opened, she stumbled in with the grace of a lie coming undone. Her lipstick was smeared like she'd wiped it off in a hurry. Her heels dangled from one hand, the straps swinging like pendulums, counting down something we both knew was already over. She froze when she saw me. Just for a second. Like a deer caught not by headlights, but by guilt. Her eyes widened, pupils blown wide with fear or alcohol or maybe just the realization that the game was finally up. The scent hit me first, her usual floral perfume, sweet and crisp, but beneath it was something else. Muskier. Male. My jaw tightened. She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the space to speak. I didn't need her to. There was nothing she could say that would rearrange the puzzle already complete in my head. I'd seen this scene before, hell, every man has, if he's lived long enough. The look. The silence. The late-night entrance after a night that lasted too long. I stood slowly, left the takeout untouched on the kitchen counter. I walked past her without brushing her shoulder. She reached out, almost as if to touch me, to stop me, but pulled her hand back like she knew better. Maybe she did. I walked to the bedroom. My bag was already packed. A man doesn't reach this point without preparing for it. I'd been noticing the cracks for months. The late work nights. The sudden distance. The locked phone, always face down. I just needed to see it for myself. And now, I had. I zipped up the suitcase, slung my coat over my shoulder, and walked to the door. Daniel, she finally breathed, her voice small, like she was just now realizing I wasn't playing the role she'd assigned me. The patient husband. The forgiving fool. I turned the knob. Don't, I said quietly. Don't insult either of us with whatever you think you need to say. Behind me, the weight of 1,000 apologies she never voiced hung in the air like smoke. But I was already gone. Not just from the house. From the story she thought we were still writing. The door clicked shut behind me, but the weight of her presence clung to me like fog. I didn't rush to the car. I stood for a moment under the porch light, its pale yellow glow flickering above my head like it couldn't quite decide whether to die or keep burning. Just like our marriage. It wasn't the lipstick or the heels that broke something in me. It was her eyes. Wide, startled, unprepared. Not for the confrontation, but for the silence. Carmen had always counted on her words. She could wrap excuses in velvet and make them sound like lullabies. But when she saw me standing there, still and quiet, she understood, there would be no speech tonight, no pleading, no performance. I'd already seen everything I needed to see. There's a strange clarity that comes in those moments, the kind that slices through years of confusion in an instant. All the second guesses I'd buried, the nights she came home late and said she was with the girls, the times I'd reached for her in bed and found only a cold shoulder, all of it aligned like a constellation. Too perfect to be coincidence. Too sharp to be denied. I wasn't angry. That surprised me most. I wasn't pacing the driveway or gripping the steering wheel like it might anchor me. I felt hollow. Not broken. Not bitter. Just done. A clean wound that no longer bled. When someone shows you who they are, you can either look away and pretend it didn't happen, or you can finally see them, and yourself, without illusion. Carmen and I had built a life full of routines, dinner at 7, vacations in the spring, birthday gifts ordered 2 weeks in advance. But somewhere in the repetition, something more essential had died. Maybe it had been dying for years and I'd just been too wrapped up in the comfort of the familiar to notice. Or maybe she had been waiting, quietly, for someone else to remind her she was still desirable, still dangerous, still alive. That realization didn't wound me like I expected. In fact, it liberated me. I drove without direction, letting the streets wind through the city like veins leading away from a heart that no longer beat for me. I wasn't chasing answers, I already had them. I wasn't trying to punish her, she'd have to live in the wreckage of her own choices. What I wanted was distance. Space from the last lie. From the memory of her perfume clinging to someone else's skin. When I stopped the car, I found myself outside an old diner on the edge of town. It wasn't intentional. Just instinct. The kind of place where the coffee is bad, but the silence is respected. I walked in, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window, watching cars drift past like I was seeing the world for the first time through someone else's eyes. I thought about the first time I met Carmen, how magnetic she was, how effortlessly she pulled me in. She had a fire in her then, a hunger for life that made me believe in the kind of love that could remake a man. And maybe she did, once. Maybe she loved me in the beginning. But the woman who stepped through that door tonight wasn't the same woman who once danced barefoot with me on the kitchen tiles. That woman is gone. What replaced her was someone who thought secrets could be hidden behind lipstick, who believed that coming home late could still mean she was coming home at all. The truth is, I mourned our marriage long before I walked out the door. This was just the burial. I watched my reflection in the diner window, a man alone but not lost, and I felt something unfamiliar, relief. There was no one left to convince, no apologies I owed, no desperate need to be understood. I had made my choice, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like the only right one. Somewhere behind me, Carmen was probably pacing, reaching for words that wouldn't come. She'd try to rewind the tape, rewrite the ending, maybe even convince herself this was all just a misunderstanding. But I wouldn't be there to hear it. I had heard all I needed in the way she looked at me, caught, not sorry. Silent, not ashamed. The realization wasn't just that she cheated. It was that I was done trying to make a home out of a place where I no longer felt safe. And that was the most honest truth I'd had in years. By the time I pulled into the storage unit, the sun was just beginning to rise. A soft amber light spilled across the rows of metal doors, casting long shadows that mirrored the ones I was finally stepping out of. I hadn't planned to be here this early, but then again, I hadn't planned on any of this. The overnight bag I'd packed weeks ago sat in the back seat, untouched but waiting. I'd packed it not in panic, but with precision. The moment I felt the shift, that subtle but unmistakable change in the way Carmen kissed me goodnight or avoided eye contact in the morning, I began preparing for this quiet departure. Inside the unit, everything was already boxed. I'd moved some of my essentials here weeks ago, telling myself it was for spring cleaning, that I was decluttering. But I knew what I was really doing. I was building a way out in plain sight, a silent protest against the emotional erosion I'd been tolerating for far too long. I opened a box labeled Documents and pulled out the manila envelope with the divorce papers inside. I'd consulted with a lawyer weeks ago, again, quietly. The man was discreet, almost clinical in the way he handled my case, but I appreciated that. There was no melodrama. Just facts, options, paths forward. I hadn't signed the papers yet, though. Part of me needed to see it for myself. Needed that final betrayal to cross a line in the sand I couldn't uncross. Now, that line was behind me. And the papers would be signed before the weekend was over. People like to romanticize forgiveness as strength. They tell you relationships are hard and that you have to work through pain, that giving up means you didn't fight hard enough. But there's a kind of dignity in walking away. A kind of clarity that only comes when you stop trying to resuscitate something that's already dead. I wasn't bitter, I was awake. Wide awake. I drove to the bank next. I had an appointment to freeze the joint account and transfer my direct deposit into a new one under my name only. It felt clinical, sure, but also clean. There was something affirming about watching the teller move my name from one account to another. It was like reclaiming parts of myself I hadn't realized I'd given away. The house, I'd decided, could be hers. Let her keep the furniture, the linens, the stainless steel appliances she was so proud of. They were just things. What I needed couldn't be held in cupboards or closets. I needed silence that wasn't heavy. I needed mornings where I didn't feel like a stranger in my own home. I needed space from the lies and the hollow affection. When I called the moving company, I didn't expect the woman on the other end of the line to ask, starting over? I paused for a second, then replied, no. I'm just moving on. Because that's what it was. Not a restart. Just a redirection. The life I thought I had wasn't mine anymore. And I wasn't going to spend another year trying to glue the pieces back together. I didn't leave a note for Carmen. There was nothing left to explain. No theatrical goodbye, no poetic metaphor scrawled on a napkin. The silence between us had been growing for so long that words now felt unnecessary. If she needed a reason, all she had to do was remember the moment she walked in last night, heels in one hand, lipstick smeared, guilt bleeding from her skin. That image said more than any farewell ever could. As I drove out of town, I glanced at the rearview mirror once, not to look back, but to confirm the road behind me was empty. No one chasing. No one begging. Just the road. Just me. I pulled off at a rest stop and got out, stretched my legs. The air felt lighter here, cleaner, untouched by betrayal. There was an old man sitting on a bench nearby, feeding crumbs to a flock of pigeons. He looked up, met my gaze, and nodded. That quiet recognition between two strangers who've both seen too much and somehow survived it. I sat on the hood of my car, let the morning breeze touch my face, and for the first time in a long while, I let myself feel it fully, the grief, the relief, the strange peace of no longer pretending. I wasn't running. I wasn't escaping. I was choosing. Choosing to not be lied to. Choosing to live in truth, even if that truth meant being alone for a while. There's a certain power in decisions made with finality. They don't ask for applause. They don't require validation. They simply are. Solid. Unshaken. Carmen may have expected a scene, a shouting match, a drunken argument, maybe even a tearful confession, but she got none of that. What she got was a door closing quietly, and a man who knew exactly what he was walking away from. And more importantly, what he was walking toward. The sky was turning the color of slate by the time I turned the car back onto our street. Not mine anymore, I reminded myself. Just ours, in name only, for now. The engine purred softly as I idled at the curb, the weight of everything I'd already done pressing down on my shoulders like the end of a long war. I hadn't come back for closure. There was no part of me still hoping for understanding. I'd come only to hand her the keys. Nothing more. The house looked the same, brick facade still neat, porch lights still on, flowers in the planter box still blooming. It was strange how ordinary it all seemed. You wouldn't know, just from looking at it, that something had fractured inside. That a life had splintered in quiet, decisive ways. I didn't knock. I still had a key, though I wouldn't for long. The door creaked open the way it always did, the hinges protesting with that familiar sigh. The smell of vanilla and citrus candles hit me, hers, always hers. She used to say she wanted the house to smell inviting, like a boutique hotel. Now, it just smelled like a place I no longer belonged. Carmen was sitting on the edge of the stairs. Not in the living room. Not pacing the kitchen. Right there, on the steps, like she'd been waiting, poised on the edge of a plea. Her heels were back on her feet now, her lipstick reapplied, hair brushed. But it didn't matter. The cleanup after the storm never hides the destruction. Not really. When she saw me, her eyes flickered with something, relief, maybe. Or hope. She stood quickly, too quickly, smoothing her dress as if posture alone might undo the night before. "Daniel," she said, voice trembling just enough to betray her. I didn't respond right away. I simply walked past her, placed the envelope with the keys and banking documents on the kitchen island, and turned back around. "You're really doing this," she said, not a question, but disbelief. I paused only for a second, letting the silence stretch, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted her to feel the weight of it. "I already did," I replied, not with cruelty, but finality. She moved toward me, slowly, hesitantly, like I was some wounded animal that might bolt if she got too close. "Can we talk?" she asked, and I could hear the desperation climbing into her voice now. "Please. I need to explain." "You had the whole night to explain," I said, calmly, evenly. "And the week before that. And every moment leading up to it." "But it's not what you think," she insisted, words tumbling out too fast. "I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I wasn't trying to." I held up a hand, cutting her off, not with anger, but with the quiet authority of a man who had reached his limit. "You don't owe me an explanation, Carmen," I said, meeting her eyes. "And I don't owe you a performance. I'm not here to yell, or cry, or rehash all the ways this could have been different. We both know it's too late for that." She looked stunned for a moment, as if the script she had prepared was no longer useful. She had expected conflict, maybe a last-minute negotiation. What she got was stillness. And stillness was terrifying to people who lived on drama. "Where will you go?" she asked softly. "Away from here," I said. "That's all you need to know." I could see her breath hitch, could see the muscles in her face fighting to hold back the emotions rushing forward. But I had no more comfort to give. "Not now. Maybe not ever." "I never thought you'd actually leave," she whispered, eyes brimming. And there it was. The truth beneath all of this. She had counted on my silence. On my patience. On the man I'd always been, the one who stayed, who forgave, who endured. But that man had left the moment she walked in with her shoes in her hand and another man's scent clinging to her skin. This version of me, the man she was staring at now, he no longer tolerated stories built on deception. "You counted on me staying," I said. "That was your real mistake." I walked to the door and opened it. Cool evening air rushed in, brushing against my skin like a benediction. I stepped outside without looking back, without waiting for more words, more attempts to mend what we both knew was broken beyond repair. As I walked down the steps, I heard her behind me, just one step, maybe two, but she didn't follow me all the way. She stood in the doorway, framed by the porch light like a ghost in a home that no longer had a soul. "Daniel," she called, a last attempt. But I didn't turn around. My footsteps were steady as I reached the car. The door closed with a clean, satisfying thud. I started the engine and rolled away from the curb like I was shedding the weight of an entire history. And still, I didn't look back. Carmen tried calling that night. 3 times, maybe 4. I didn't check. I just saw her name light up the screen, over and over, like a flare sent up too late. I let the phone ring out each time, then finally turned it off completely. There was nothing left to say, and I wasn't about to open a door I'd already closed with every step I took away from her. I checked into a small coastal in 2 towns over. It wasn't fancy. The paint peeled slightly on the windowsills, the mattress dipped a little in the middle, and the faucet made a noise like a sigh when you turned it on. But the place was quiet, and the sheets were clean. More importantly, it didn't hold any memories of her. No echoes of our laughter. No scent of her perfume embedded in the curtains. Just solitude, and peace. In the morning, I walked along the shoreline, the cold wind biting at my cheeks. My shoes filled with sand, and I didn't care. The sky was gray, but there was a strange kind of beauty in its dullness. It didn't try to impress me. It simply was. For the first time in a long while, I felt the same about myself. Back in the room, I watched the waves from the window. Carmen's voice, once a near constant in my life, had gone silent. The calls had stopped by midday. Maybe she understood. Or maybe she was just regrouping, preparing another angle. Either way, I didn't wonder about her thoughts. That part of my brain, the one that used to map her moods, decode her silences, and navigate her lies, was finally still. I thought about the man I'd become over the years. The compromises I'd made. The times I'd talked myself out of gut feelings because love had trained me to doubt myself. And yet, it was in this silence, this separation, that I began to feel like myself again. Like I had peeled off a skin that never quite fit and stepped into the man I should have been all along. I didn't hate her. That surprised me, maybe more than anything. I wasn't nursing some deep, festering anger. I wasn't plotting revenge or reliving every betrayal. I simply didn't care to carry her with me anymore. The grief had already come and gone in small doses, years before I ever walked out that door. This was something else. Not forgiveness. Not rage. Just emptiness. And in a strange way, that emptiness felt like freedom. Eventually, Carmen did send a message. Just a few lines. No apologies, just confusion. She wrote, "I thought we could still fix it. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I miss you. Please just talk to me." I read it once, quietly. Then I deleted it. Not in a moment of spite, but because I didn't need it. Her words could no longer reach me, not in the way they once did. The hardest part wasn't walking out. It was knowing that she'd never fully understand why I did. To her, I'd always be the one who gave up, the man who walked away when she was finally ready to explain. But I hadn't left because she cheated. I'd left because she had stopped seeing me long before she ever touched another man. The betrayal was just the confirmation. The decision was already alive inside me, long before she ever realized I'd made it. And so, I let her sit with that silence, the same way I had sat with hers for far too long. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They live in the spaces between words. And for Carmen, that space was now a canyon she could never cross.